Hello and welcome to the Leading Lounge. I'm your host, Dr. Justin Dubose. Here in the Leading Lounge, we talk with today's leaders and unpack lessons learned and being learned from a career of leading and communicating in their field. These conversations are designed to be both informal and informative, and we want to equip you with wisdom and tools to empower you as a leader where you are and where you want to be. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 36 of the Leading Lounge. I'm grateful you're here and I'm excited to bring you our first interview of season 5. So I got to sit down with my former military boss, Colonel D. Scotty Lene. He spent almost 30 years in the Army and Army Reserves, most of that within the psychological operations community. Most recently was the commander of 7th Group, where I'm currently serving as group chaplain. So I sent him some questions and said, hey, sir, before you roll out of here, can I pick your brain, that deep brain full of wisdom, and get you to share some of that wisdom with the world? So the one thing I really appreciated about this interview is here's a man who's full bird colonel, and he's got almost 3 decades worth of time in the saddle. And the thing that he reflected on the most and shared about the most was the human side of leadership, which is often the side, especially in military circles, I think, that often gets overlooked. When we're young and we're first starting out, we're hard chargers, we're ready to accomplish the mission. And the temptation can be that we see our people really as interchangeable parts. And so Colonel Lene does a great job here of unpacking why people matter. If he could go back again, what would Colonel Lene tell Lieutenant Lene, and share some of that wisdom? So no matter what field you're in, I know that there's going to be plenty here for you to glean and apply to you and your team. So enjoy this interview, and we'll see you next time for episode 37. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Leading Lounge. I've got a special guest with me today. Recently, a military boss of mine, Colonel Scotty Lene, or D. Scotty Lene. Which is it?
It's D. Scotty Lene.
D. Colonel D. Scotty Lene. So, consented to answer some questions and share some wisdom. So, appreciate that, sir. I was just going to lob up the first question to you, since you're a man on the move, and we'll just see where we go with it. But first question I typically ask everybody is just, can you tell us about yourself and your professional journey that got you to where you are today in a parking lot at Fort Liberty?
Okay. Well, like Justin said, my name is Scotty Lene, and I've been in the military about 28 years. I'm originally from a little place called LaBelle, Texas, which is outside of Beaumont, Texas, which is outside of Houston, Texas, pretty much right on the border of the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana. I grew up there. I went to college there. While I was in college, I was offered a scholarship to compete for a scholarship. And that's where, in college, like everyone else, I still had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I never really even considered the military an option. I was going to enlist right out of high school, but I ended up getting accepted into college. So I took that route instead. And then in college, I thought that I had no idea what I was going to do. But anyway, I went to this camp and competed and won the scholarship and loved it. I mean, I absolutely enjoyed every minute that I was there. I had a great time. And I was like, if this is what I can do the rest of my life, then I'm all in.
Yeah.
And so, so now, after joining the military, I started off as an air defense officer, which is like Stinger missiles and Bradleys and Avengers. And then I switched over to psychological operations, which I currently do. And I've been doing that for about 22, 23 years now. 22 years. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And so that's kind of who I am, where I'm at. I have a lovely wife, Wendy. We have 6 sons between us, 5 grandkids, and 1 on the way. So we're getting busy to being grandparents. And so life's good and enjoying it. And I'm getting ready to retire here in a couple of months. And so it's been a great ride. It's been a great experience. But it's time to move on to, we're going to say, greener pastures, right?
Yeah.
And
So ever since that camp experience, it's all been Army, right? That's all you've done your whole adult life?
that's all I've done. That's all I've done. It's all I really wanted to do. Um, I've had my struggles, as most people have, and so I would say, relationship wise, I'll go ahead and share this with everybody. I'm a hot mess. I've been married. I'm on my fourth marriage. It took me a long time to learn that I can't save you, or was really, really happy with who I was and could just be by myself. So it took me a long time, a lot of counseling, a lot of work to realize that I was an okay dude and it was all right to just be me.
Mhm.
But until then, that I realized that that's what you need to be before you can make anybody else happy. You have to be happy and within yourself, and you have to have your own, I guess, roots grounded and all that stuff. So anyway, doing well now. Me and my wife Wendy, we get along really good, and she's really, really a good woman and a good spiritual Christian woman, and so she helps me out a lot, and I hope I help her out a little bit too. But and that's kind of where I'm at today. I'm right at the end. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and ready to move on to the next chapter.
Yeah. Well, you're a rare breed to me because I don't know if you remember this, but you seem to enjoy, you talked about enjoying it and not want to do anything else. You seem to enjoy it all the way up to now. When we got back from Korea and you popped in on a range in where were we? Um
Fort Hunter Liggett.
yes, Hunter Liggett. And you were out on the range and I was out there and I said something like, "You really enjoy this, don't you, sir?" And you were like, "Yeah, I really enjoy it." But even like, almost 30 years in, you seem to still just enjoy what you're doing every day, which is a rare thing, I think.
That believe it or not, is, a lot of folks think military and they think that, you're out there in the woods like the commercials every day. And the fact is you're not. You're in an office building trying to get things ready to be out there, or working on quote unquote readiness stuff and making sure people are ready to go and have all their shots and schools and stuff and training. But when you finally get out there on a range, something really simple like, an M17 range, which is pistol ranges, I mean, now you're having fun. That's
Right.
fun. That this is what I signed up to do. And quite honestly, I mean, that range, I'm kind of glad you brought that up because I didn't think about that. But everyone will go through this as you get later in your career and even into retirement, and you're looking back and you're thinking about all the things that you wish you had done, and just sometimes just being in the moment of reminiscing of your first range or whatever, and then you want to embark all that on the younger generations. And so you grab all those lieutenants and you just start teaching them, and you
Mm-hmm.
get up line and you show them that, I'm 51 years old, but I can shoot too. And,
Yeah.
I know I don't look like the same soldier I once did, but we can get in there and get after it as well, and then start giving them pointers of, how you do it. And it's really fun. It's really fun. That was a fun day because, was doing some things that they didn't expect the colonel to do, and then, shooting well and talking a little trash, and then teaching them how to run a range and teaching them how to police up a range. That's the big thing, and how to, what it's all about. So I mean, I absolutely enjoyed that. I mean, those are things you live for.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna ask you the next question. Go into the bag, right? Go into the past. So you're at the end of this kind of long, distinguished military career, been all over the place. So if you think back to early career roles, maybe captain or Lieutenant Lene, even, how did some of those early career roles help prepare you for leadership roles later? Like You know, you just got done with seventh group or something like that. But what happened early on that helped prepare you for later? And I'm thinking specifically, okay, imagine you're on the range again and you got these young
Yeah.
lieutenants huddled up. What do you tell them back from those days to say, hey, this is coming down the road for you. Be ready and enjoy this now, kind of thing?
Justin, interestingly enough, I'm not perfect, but I actually do try to make a point to do that, even with the young lieutenants. And um, what's interesting about that is I have a Lieutenant Lene. So my son Dolan's a lieutenant, and he calls me from time to time and asks me, hey, Dad, how do you do this, or what do you do there? And even when he was a cadet, and so you do take that chance, and you don't pass up that opportunity to share what you have. And I think it's something I've always been really good at. I mean, I've always end up working late because I spend a lot of my time during the day talking to people and not getting my work done. So then I have to stay a little bit later to get it done. But I was, and then reminiscing with some of my peers, and we're dreaming about just talking about the good old days. And when we were captains, we were so invincible. Like, you really thought nothing could hurt you and nothing could affect you, and you didn't think about those things. Where when you get older and you realize you truly are mortal, you realize how not smart you were on a lot of things, and how arrogant you were, and how, um, you know, you still gave it everything you had, but you kind of wish that you would have kind of stepped back and assessed a little bit more before you just went charging into the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I were gonna go back, things that one of the things that my dad taught me growing up was never be afraid to say you're sorry. He's always like, never pass up an opportunity to say I love you. Always admit when you're wrong, and always apologize when you are. And say, don't be afraid to say you're sorry. So I made a lot of mistakes through my career, and I made a lot of phone calls to people in my career and to tell them, hey, I probably didn't treat you the way I should have treated you, or I probably said something I shouldn't have said, or I probably should have listened a little bit better. And so I've eaten a lot of crow. And I think, in the Army, when I was growing up in the Army, we had this saying, as you were. And as you were means I made the mistake, but I'm saying as you were because I will never admit that I'm wrong. And I remember when one of my NCOs was telling me about this, I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I mean, if you're wrong, you're wrong, and so I would always say, as I was. Part of me being defiant, part of me, accepting who I was, and I'd say, as I was. Yeah, it's supposed to be as you were. I'm like, yeah, no, it's as I was, because I'm the one that's wrong here, not you. So, and whether that's true or not, or that was a legend, or just that guy's interpretation of that, that's the way I always took it. So I always said that, and I had to make some calls. So if I was talking to Lieutenant Lene today, we come out of college, we come out of our basic trainings, and we come out of those things, and we're just roaring and ready to go, and you're ready to conquer the world. I would tell them to slow down a little bit and just be in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Don't stop. Don't 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 stop with doing what you're doing. Still seize the objective, still get to where you're going, but take a minute and cherish where you're at. And now we call it take a tactical pause. You know, um, and that's where you can actually smell the in the military terms, you can smell the battlefield, you can feel it, you can seal it, see it, use all your senses to really absorb it and soak it in. But you can do that throughout life. I mean, now I'm a grandparent, and things you learn as a grandparent that you don't realize as a parent is go to the park, take the 2 hours. There's all kind of memes and cliches, and you only get a finite amount of time with your kids when they're kids. You get a lot more time with them when they're adults. It doesn't mean you need to not spend any time with your adult kids, but it means take the time with your children to make sure that you take that time, because you can't get that back.
Right.
So I had regrets that I would tell Lieutenant Lene, who's about to be expecting his first child. I don't know what it is, but we don't know. But I would say take the time to spend with your kid. Because if I had any regrets going back, it's that I didn't spend enough time with my kids, and I always thought the mission was more important.
Mm-hmm.
And mission's important, but it's not that important. And but so if I was going again, I mean, I have so much that I would say to him. Take the time to stop and listen. There's people that have been doing this a lot longer than you. Now, a lot of folks in my career didn't think I was listening, but I was.
Yeah.
So I was always like sitting there watching a lot of times, and then I'd start talking, and then they would say, well, you're not listening. And I'm like, but I've been listening for like 35 minutes. I haven't really heard anything real brilliant. So I decided so, and that's not the case all the time, but a lot of times folks didn't think I was listening, and I was. But take the time to listen and listen to those people. Try to see things from their point of view. One of the wonderful things about the military is you come from so many different walks of life. You literally have no idea the guy you're talking to, what their past is or what they've been through or any of those things. And I remember once as a lieutenant, we were in a convoy, and I'm in the right side of the vehicle, and I can see this mirror out the Humvee, and I'm looking in the back down the line. And this one Humvee is like literally off the road the whole time. I'm looking at headlight, all in her line. And then I see this one headlight way over here. I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I'm on the radio and, asking what's going on with this guy. And I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, it's really simple, man. Follow the car in front of you. Stay on the road. And so when we had one of our pauses, I'm talking to one of the NCOs, and he's like, hey, sir, this guy's never driven before. He's from New York City. This is his first time to drive a vehicle.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy. I've been driving cars since I was like 8 years old. Around my farm and driving tractors. And I'm in third grade with a cast up to my elbow or past my elbow, cutting the field. And, and driving was always something that was just like we did. And so, right. To have someone who's never driven a car before, I was just like, I remember saying something smart to the NCO, saying, well, probably this isn't the best time for him to learn, do some training with him first and then put him on the road. But like, so when else is he going to learn? I'm like, well, I guess we're in it now.
Yeah.
So that one thing did help me have a little bit of patience. But I was still frustrated because at that point, like I said, I'm that young. I'm charging forward. I'm accomplishing the mission, and I didn't really want to make the time to take that time to train that person. But we did, and then I don't know whatever came of it or how it ended up. But that was like a lesson to listen, and then try to listen to people that are actually trying to take care of you. Because I had a lot of times where NCOs were literally genuinely trying to take care of me. And I just wasn't having it because I was just like, I'm not really sure what your angle is. I don't really trust you. So I'm not going to really listen. And those are some phone calls that I made later and said, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. I didn't know what you knew.
Yeah.
I didn't know what you knew. And so I'm sorry I didn't trust you. And it meant a lot to them. The one that I did call, not the one, because I made a few of those calls. One of the ones I did call, it meant a lot to him that I did circle back because I was really a jerk to him because we didn't see things really eye to eye and kind of left on bad terms. And he tried to make amends before he left. And again, in my arrogance, I wasn't having it. But thankfully, I was able to make that call, and have that conversation with him because, it meant a lot to him that I did that. And so that's what I tell Lieutenant Lene is, slow down, take in the moment, and then, and then just enjoy it,
Yeah.
like, pretend you're out on that range and just enjoy it. And everything. I've always been, I would say I'm good at this, but to me, I'm a training kind of a person. It's just in my DNA. Like I'm in a training event right now. This call is a training event. And so, everything I do is training. And so I always look for those opportunities to learn and grow. And like, so, you can take it to a spiritual side too, is what is Yah, what is the Lord, what is the Father trying to teach me right now? Like, why am I doing this? What does he want out of this? And then, reflect, on those things and then try to come up with what your lesson is, and so always learn, always grow, always learn your lessons, and then try to share those with your soldiers and the people that you're and explain those things. A lot of times people just don't know why. And it's really, you can explain why. And then they're like, oh, well, then I'm all in. Where before it was just like, do this, I don't want to do it.
Right.
But
yeah.
While we're doing it, it makes more sense. Okay. Well, I can help you out with that then, sir.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got your support. Thank you very much.
Yeah. There must be something about a younger, not just in a military world, but just in life, younger people needing reminders from, can I call you and I older maybe, because the same advice you just gave is a lot of the same advice a whole lot of people I talk to give, which is almost just like hey, slow down, and it's all about the people and whatever. And it must be something that it's easy. It's almost like innate to forget or something, is that you're such a hard charger when you're young that you forget that this whole thing is all about the people anyway. And so let's just slow down and make sure we're taking care of the people, and the mission will be fine. But so there was another question later I was going to ask you, which was, if the present you could visit the younger you, what advice about leadership would you give yourself? Which I think is a question you answered. So I'm gonna re-ask the question I asked you a minute ago. It's more specific to like the roles you had in the military, your military career roles, and see if you can pull out anything specific. That'd be great. But did there any particular role or any instance early on, like maybe you did answer, maybe that training event, the guy that hadn't driven before, but something that helped prepare you for like a later leadership role where you had a bigger scope?
Let me give you something. Let's go a little further back than that, because one, I'll tell you, early on in my career, I had a lieutenant colonel who always said, he was a battalion commander, and I was a lieutenant, second lieutenant, brand new. Always take the hard jobs. Never shy away from the hard job. And so I always sought out the hard jobs. And even and crazy enough, later, even when I got an easier job, I ended up finding ways to make it hard. And so that's a terrible thing to say. I was always looking for something to do. And how do we get better? But I will tell you this, believe it or not, the leadership things that I really learned in life, I learned in high school sports. And so we had a very, I'm going to say, dominating high school football team. No, we didn't win the Texas State Championship, but we went to the playoffs every single year. We had some really high scoring games. We had a really good explosive offense on our in my sophomore, junior, and senior year. We had some really good, backs that went to great colleges that did well. So it wasn't me, but the things that I learned was in, high school football and high school baseball about, there's no I in team, put the team first. And I remember I was a case in high school, and I would do weird stuff. Like I would make bets between Texas and Texas A&M and find Texas A&M shaved in the back of my head because I lost the bet, or checkerboard my hair or something because I just didn't really care. I was having fun, and coach would always pull me aside. His name was Coach Tilton. Would say, "You're being an individual," and I never got that. I'm just being me. I'm just having fun. But you didn't think about putting a longhorn in your head. You put this Texas A&M because you lost a bet or you put a checkerboard. You're drawing attention to yourself. And I'm a kid, I'm immature, but those are things that really have stuck with me about, being an individual versus being a team. And then on my baseball team was the same way. If coach told you to lay down a sacrifice bunt, that's what you did. You're going to get out. Your batting average is going to go down. You're going to advance the runner, but you might win the game. And then he started teaching you how to look at the game in a way where the team has to come together to win the game. You can't just rely on the pitcher. You can't just rely on the batter or whatever, and there's no individual. And so that's where I really learned as far as leadership goes. And then I also learned in high school early on that you don't always have to be the leader to lead. That's a hard lesson for a lot of people to learn because you want to be the guy. But as a leader, especially my senior year in baseball, I was the leader of the baseball team. And I learned that I was getting my energy from the other players. And there was people that weren't quite vocal. I felt like I had to be vocal. I had to play that role because I'm the senior. And there was two of us, but I was the more vocal of the two of us. I was a senior, so I felt like I had to be the leader. But I had some juniors that had some extreme talent and some sophomores even that were really good players that I would actually get inspiration from. And so when you talk about a point that I did something to prepare myself for leadership, I would say not all, but a good bit of my leadership qualities came from sports. And I would say that as an officer in the Army, specific things that prepared me for later. I was a battery commander because I was an air defense battery. I was a battery commander out at the National Training Center. And so we're in the OPFOR, the opposing forces. And so we're fighting when these units come out to do rotations, we're the opposing forces that fight them every month. And we would just obliterate them because we did it every single month. We were very well trained. We were well organized. We knew what we were doing. We knew what they were doing, and we just were really good. And that was like one of the best jobs to have because every month you're doing your job. You're doing what the Army, you signed up to do. But in that, that propelled me in my career because everything comes back to training. So every time even in Iraq, we were in a convoy one day, and we were. I think it was the same day we got ambushed in this convoy, and my detachment sergeant was driving, and now we had finished. We'd fought through the ambush, and then we go in our Humvee, and it won't go. And he's like, "Sir," and we're seeing all these trucks in our convoy moving, and we're stuck. We're sitting there, and we're just not moving. And he hasn't drive. And I said, he goes, "Sir, we're not moving." I go, "What do you mean we're not moving?" He goes, "It's in drive." I go, he goes, "We're not moving." I said, "Throw it in high lock." He's like, "What?" I said, "Throw it in high lock and let's go." And he goes, "Whatever." So he throws it in high lock, engages the back tires, and takes off. So a lot of people don't know that Humvees are front wheel drive. We had broken the half shaft in the front, and so he didn't know to engage the back tires. And that's something that I learned out at the National Training Center. Like, what does Humvee do? It made a heck of a racket because the half shaft was broken, and so it was down there, the wheel spinning, and it was just beating around everything in the front of that truck, which wasn't a good thing. But that's for mechanics to deal with later. But that was like a really defining moment because that was like something little that I'd learned at the previous position that it ultimately, I won't say it saved our lives because we had already fought through the ambush and that was pretty much over, but it didn't leave us stranded on the side of the road.
Right.
We were able to hobble back enough to get to a safe place to secure the half shaft and then to get it back, evac back to get it fixed. And, but so things that you learn I'd say that propelled you forward, though, that in the leadership stuff of being, you know, truly commanding, and both, you know, garrison and getting ready, and then also in the field, really helped open my eyes to how to see things. Sometimes out there we commanded, it's crazy, we commanded from the top of our humpies. So the commanders were in the turrets where we could, and then we had these big map boards that sat out on the side with us. And so you could be you're up on the gun, you're watching the map, and you have both your radios up by you while your driver is driving. So, but now you can see the map, you can see the battlefield. If you have to fight, you can. But then you have the radios where you can communicate. So I just learned all that. You know, we have an Army cadence called shoot, move, communicate, boom, boom. That's where you learn. You know, that's what you do. You shoot, you move, you communicate. And
Yeah.
And I've taken that with me at every job. How do I visualize the battlefield? Whether the battlefield is a real battlefield, whether it's a hurricane coming into the coast, and how are we going to respond to that hurricane? And or is it readiness? Is it, you know, I need folks to get ready on dental. How do I get all my guys their dental stuff done? How do I get all my medical? What can I see? What I'm looking at? What am I fighting? And then that imparted on me, which I used later, when I would tell my guys to find the delta. And they had no idea what I'm talking about. But you say that like 15 times before somebody goes, sir, I got a question. I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean by find the delta? And I'm like, and so I stopped. And I was like, so I've been saying this for a while now. So none of you guys know what I'm talking about? No, sir, we have you're talking about. You keep saying this thing. We think it's a magical term, but we have no idea what it is. I was, so why'd y'all wait so long to ask me this question? You know, and they're like, oh, we just figured it would come out. You know, we didn't want to look dumb. I'm like, well, one, okay, don't do that. You don't know that. But two, you know, find the deltas, find the difference, find the what's missing. So, and so the example I would give them is like, so you have 100 people in your company, 90 of them are good. They have all their stuff. 10 of them aren't. You don't forget about the 90, but you focus on the 10.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so now you're not having to fight 100. You're just fighting the 10, and you're not really fighting them, but you're fixing the 10. But you always got to watch the other 90. It doesn't mean you forget about them. Oh, they're good, forget about them. It just means focus on the delta. What's the difference in what you have to what you need? Focus on that difference. And that's how you build in our job. That's how you build combat power. That's how you build it. You know, you focus on what do I need? What's my mission? What'd you give me to do it? What am I missing? Focus on that.
Yeah.
Fix that. Training does, you know. So, and those things I learned out in the desert, in the Mojave Desert, you know, at the National Training Center, and then listening to videos and stuff. And then I'll tell you the other big lesson I did, if I can, real quick, out there. I had some bad experiences with my non-commissioned officers as a lieutenant. And so they weren't terrible. It's just like part of it being me stubborn, part of it being I didn't really feel like not a lot of them, I didn't feel like some of them really were being very honorable. Mm-hmm. And that's a bad mistake, because they really are. So I was very upfront with my NCOs when I got to Port Irwin and said, look, here's the thing. We had a big huddle talking to, and I told them, I said, listen, I just don't trust you. Everyone says, listen to your NCOs. Everybody says, you know, NCOs are the backbone of the Army. NCOs lead the way. Whatever you do, listen to your NCOs. And I'm just telling you, I haven't had that experience. Every time an NCO said, don't worry about the search, NCO business, means they were hiding something or they were doing something illegal. And to me, okay, so now I really got to watch you, because you're just telling me that, so I won't pay attention. So I'm telling you all guys where I stand. Take it for what it is. And so those NCOs, and I'm going to tell you the leader, this is one of those deals, wasn't the first sergeant, wasn't even a platoon sergeant. He was, at that time, he was a section sergeant. His name was Navarro. And those NCOs had a choice that day. They could have tanked me. They could have said, you know, to heck with this guy. We're going to teach him and we're going to end him. Or they did what they did. And it was Navarro, from what I found out, who stepped up and said, you know what, guys? Let's prove him wrong. Let's show him what a true NCO corps can do for him. And 1 year to the day later, we went back to there and we had the bleachers, and I apologized to every one of them. And I said, and that was probably the best crow I've ever eaten. Because they could have let me fail. They could have let the battery fail. But quite honestly, and I will tell you this, it wasn't so much they cared about me, because they did. They cared about me, and I cared about them too. But they cared about the unit, and they cared about the mission, and they didn't want to make a vendetta because I was being immature and saying, I don't trust you guys. But one, the open honesty helped us get past the communication.
Right.
So now, sometimes somebody's got to say something hard up front to open the dialogue. And then, as it turns out, what ends up coming out of that is, I would say, a genuine love for each other. You know what I mean? You end up truly appreciating what everybody does. And I really do, to this day, some of the best NCOs I've ever worked with in my life were in that battery. You know, so, but that was something that really, really helped develop me later, because it helped me say what you mean up front, work through it, and then reassess. And it's okay to say, hey, look, you guys proved me wrong.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. And I think it made me a better person, a better leader. It took a while to be a good leader. I tell folks now, you have to genuinely care. You can't fake that.
Right.
You can fake it for a little while, but after a little bit, it comes out.
Yeah.
And people know it, and they can sniff it out, and then they will drop you.
Yeah.
If you don't genuinely care about your people, about the mission, about, the equipment, if you don't genuinely care, you're really in the wrong line of work, because it just won't work. And I tell people, be yourself. You can't, if you're an extrovert, be an extrovert.
Right. Yeah.
If you're an introvert, be an introvert. There's strength in all of those qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Find strengths in those qualities and really capitalize on those strengths. And so, I'm not sure I still answered the question. I told a couple more stories, but I think prepare was take the hard jobs, admit when you're wrong, do assessments, always assess, take that time to reflect.
Yeah.
Figure out the lessons learned and make your corrections and keep going.
No, it was a good answer. You did answer it, sir. And I was going to say, it's interesting too, like asking that question to people and thinking for myself back on something like that, that I think you're right. It's like often the lessons that you learn are not, I mean, sometimes they are specific to, they're like technical skills or some knowledge base or whatever. But a lot of times it really is just related to people. I learned that it's good to be humble. I learned that it's, you got to show yourself trustworthy, and if you want people to trust you, or, that this honesty opens the door to communication. So those things, I think, I mean, even like, I'm a chaplain. So even within the chaplain corps, I find myself telling chaplains that who are supposed to be like the people of the Army, is like, hey, this technical knowledge is great and it is helpful and you are going to use it, but just be yourself. Just be a people person. Trust people, be honest with people, and let them know that you're trustworthy, and it'll take you a lot farther than knowing where to find some information or how to submit a thing or some database or whatever.
Right. And if you're genuine, even with your flaws, like I've got flaws. I mean, I stand before you to tell you I am not a perfect man. My wife thinks I am, but
also might be a little delusional, but go ahead.
If you're genuine, people are way more, I'm gonna say, apt to forgive.
Yeah.
And way more apt to work with you. If you're fake, people then they sense it and they sniff it out, and they're less likely to help you through. In fact, sometimes they might try to help you not make it.
Yeah.
And so, if you're genuine and they know you're genuine, then they're more forgiving, and they're like, yeah, you're a hot mess, but we love you because you're a hot mess. But at
Right.
least you come back and you genuinely care about me, and I'll tell you, there's been times where I've had to make hard decisions for people, and there's been times where I've had friends, and I'm gonna say friends, who have taken advantage of my position, and I have to tell them, like, listen, we're friends, and I got that. But in this role, if you put me in this position, I will do my job.
Mm-hmm.
There is no, well, he's my friend, so therefore I'm going to brush this under the rug. It's like, you better come correct
Mm-hmm.
when we're in this line. Now, on this line, I'm going to call you up and say, hey, let's talk about what happened. What can I do to help you? Is there anything I can do? But on this line, if I got to punish you, I'm going to punish you.
Yeah.
And you're going to be, what in the heck is this guy doing? He's like, one minute he wants to send me to jail. The next minute he's calling me up to ask me if I'm okay. I'm like, who are you? And I'm like, well, on this side, I do care about you. I really do care. On this side, I care about you, but I also care about good order and discipline of the organization. So I'm going to hold this line. But
Right.
I'm also going to be okay. Because
Mm-hmm.
honestly, you concern me as a friend that you're doing this. So what the heck? So I mean, you got to hold people accountable, be genuine, so that, and then you get a lot more, you make a lot of ground.
Yeah.
You can't tell people to genuinely be fake, but you make a lot of ground. Just being yourself
Yeah.
and say, who I am. Here I am, naked, not literally in front of you. This is who I am. So,
Yeah.
take it for what it is.
Yeah, I know exactly right. Exactly right. Well, let me ask you a different question, and it's a question I really enjoy hearing people's answers to, especially people who've had a long time in a career like you have. But you've served with a lot of people, a lot of leaders, above you and subordinates too. But who would you say, or is there somebody who would you say is the best leader you ever served with, and what was it about them that really made them great, really made them stick out to you?
Interestingly enough, we were supposed to do this podcast last night, and I told you that I had dinner plans, and um, I didn't forget about, but I made them later. I actually made them after we had agreed to do the podcast, and I asked you if you would forgive me and let me do this because I needed to do it. But I went to dinner with one of my old bosses and his wife, and I keep up with him. And in my military career, I'll say this: you run into a lot of people that fit in this category.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about who's number one, who's the best leader you've ever served with. That's a hard question because usually, and I'd say I would hope there's a lot of them. You also have the category of the people who affected you the most the other way. Like,
Yeah.
who did you absolutely not want to be like?
Right.
But anyway, we'll focus on your question. His name is Major General retired Buzz Altshuler, and he was the commander of the USAK-POC, and I was his aide. And being his aide, is like I'm his executive assistant, gave me an opportunity to see firsthand a two-star general and how they process, what they think about things. We'd have conversations. I'm a captain. He's a two-star general. I've got all of maybe 8 years in the Army at the time. He's got 36, so it's like sponge, like
Mm-hmm.
watching him. But the things that most impressed me about him wasn't the fact that he was a two-star general. It was the way he dealt with people and the way he dealt with life, and that's where you learn. So this is going to take a minute to work through, but
Sure.
we are at Green Ramp, which is where the airfield is at, where we're loading the airplane to go to Iraq. Me and my detachment sergeant are sitting there. We had met maybe 3 weeks before, so it was one of those deals where I get to the unit, congratulations, we're leaving for Iraq. Make sure your stuff's packed. So, we're talking, we're sitting there visiting, and we're getting ready to load this airplane. And I look across over there and I see this older gentleman walking by and talking to everybody. I mean, it was like literally methodical. Just wasn't just walking through, shaking people's hands, getting through them. Like, he was stopping, talking to people. He was listening to them, asking them about their families. He was and just going through and going through. And I was like, hey, who's that old guy? And he's like, well, that's the CG. I'm like, the CG of what? And he goes, use a K-pop. And I'm like, we have a CG. And I'd been through the training. I should have known this stuff, right? uh, but I'm new to this community. And he goes, yeah. And he's right there. And I'm like, it's interesting. And so I'm watching him. So then I start watching him, and he comes around to us, and he sits there and he talks, and he asks about my wife, and he asks about my kids, and he asks about, what I did before, and he's asking all these things. And you could just see in his face, he's really sincere. It's like he's not just asking the question. He's like listening to the answer, and he's engaged. So he's listening. And so he goes, well, at the end of it, he's like, well, God bless you. Get over there, do your job, come home safe, and we'll be praying for you. And so then he moved to the next little group, and he just goes right down the line. He spent 2 hours easily, doing this. So then we get on the plane, we go to Iraq. And I was like, and I remember sitting there thinking, that's a guy I could learn something from. So you're always looking for these things. You're looking for mentors. You're looking for, who can I take something from to help me get better? So I'm going to Iraq, and we're at the end of our tour, and my company commander calls me up and says, hey, you've been selected to interview to be the aide to the commander of UCK-POC, and I'm just telling you, you don't want that job. You want to stay down here, and you want to do your team time, and you want to learn your job. And he was absolutely right. I mean, what he said was not wrong. Me and him didn't always see eye to eye on things. He's still a good man, but we didn't always see eye to eye on things. And that made me say, well, being that he's telling me I don't want that job, I want that job. And
Yeah.
so, because I'm a little bit, what's that word?
Ornery or obstinate, or
any one of those words.
Yeah, okay.
So I walk into that dadgum headquarters when we get back. And what was funny is the guy that actually recommended me for that job was a guy that I'd worked with at the 11th ACR out at NTC, who knew me there. So he knew my true capability. And in fact, what got me into the job that got me in Iraq was another guy that had worked with me before, who said, hey, where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go to Bravo Night. And he goes, that's where you're going to be. And so I was like, great. So anyway, so I come back, and I walk into his office, and I said, sir, my name is Captain Lene, and I really want this job. That was what I said. And so he says, well, let's have a talk. So we sit down and we talk. And I told him that story. And I don't want to put too much of his business, but he saw his eyes well up, because I was like, I said, I remember watching you, sir. I remember watching you. I said, there's a guy I can learn something from. So what I want to do in this next year of being your aide is I just want to be able to watch you, help you do your job, and then learn from you. So I got the job. But having said that, so that doesn't even get to the meat of the story. So I got to travel with him, right? So I'm going to places, and he's asking me about, I'm an active duty person. I'm an active component. I'm not a reservist at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a component person that works for a reserve general. Don't have any idea about the reserves at all. And which a lot of people are like, that's weird, but that's how it is. If you're active duty, you don't know nothing about the reserve.
Right.
Usually.
Yeah. Two different worlds.
2 different worlds. And so I'm sitting here listening to some of these meetings we're going to, and I'm asking him questions like, he'll come back and go, what do you think about that? I was like, sir, I don't understand how you guys do this. He's like, what do you mean? I go, so we just sat through this meeting. These guys flew out here on their own dime, spent the weekend getting the crap kicked out of them to pay themselves to go back home. And the money that they made by being here didn't cover their travel expenses to get here. So they're basically paying to play. I don't understand that. I don't understand how that works. And he goes, that's right. That's how, believe it or not, that's how it is in the Army Reserve. And I'm like, it's like a really expensive hobby. He goes, well, it's a little bit more than a hobby. It's a commitment. So then the opportunity came. So they started recruiting me to go AGR, which is Active Guard Reserve, which is your full time, but in the reserves. So I finally said I would do it, because at that point in my life, I realized that I wanted to be a dad. I always wanted to be a dad, but I wasn't being a dad. I was being a soldier because I was in North Carolina. My kids were in Texas. I needed to go get my kids. So he was able to get me to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I was able to eventually get custody of my kids, which worked out good. And I was able to continue to serve. But back to what he did that made me really inspire him, not inspire him, but be inspired by him, was this one specific moment. And these were moments like this. There was moments like this all the time. This happened all the time. But there was one that I always remember very distinctly. We're traveling together. We're going through Atlanta. Everything from Bragg or from Fayetteville, North Carolina goes through Atlanta. Now, Charlotte, but mostly Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So we're I come off the airplane. I never sat with him when we traveled. We always sat separate because he wanted to be able to focus on what he was doing. Didn't want to feel obligated to talk to anybody or anything like that. So I always sat where I could see him, but I didn't sit by him. So anyway, I get off the plane and I'm down the jetway and I'm waiting for him to get our connection. And he's not coming. And I'm like, well, I wonder what's going on with him. Whatever. So I keep waiting. It's not that long, but to me, I'm sitting there waiting, so it feels like forever.
Mm-hmm.
But and all of a sudden I see this guy coming down the aisleway, pushing a stroller, carrying a bag. And there's a single mom. I don't know if she was single, but she was a mom flying by herself with the baby in her arm and holding another bag. And they're just struggling down the jetway. And he comes out and he hands me a bag and says, "Here, take this." And he gets the stroller and he helps her get all set up and everything. But that right there, I was sitting there going, and my first thought in my head was, what are you doing? We got a plane to catch. But the other thought was, I asked him about this. I said, "Sir, that was great." Because one, it touched me. I mean, this guy, no kidding, cared about people.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, I'm only taking care of soldiers. I care about people. And this lady needed help and I could help her. And I'm the oldest guy on this airplane because at that time he was in his late 60s. I mean, he wasn't like a young guy. I'm the guy. And so he's the one helping her. And so that really touched me. And I asked him later, I said, "Sir, what were you doing there?" He goes, "Well, she needed help." I'm like, "Sir, we had a plane to catch." He goes, "Yeah, but I got an 8. He could have got us on another plane had we missed it." And I was like, touche. And so, but still, that's the kind of man he was. So
Yeah.
I learned to not respect him as a leader. I learned to respect him as a man. And so, and that's the kind of person that you want to follow.
Yeah. No,
And
great story.
I'm not gonna say I'm like him. I'm not gonna say I'm anything like this. I mean, but that's who I try to aspire to be, is to genuinely care about people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mission just takes care of itself.
Yeah. Actually, I asked maybe this almost exact same question set to Colonel Mann, David Mann, when he retired.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this question, and I told him some version of this story, but it's interesting. The guy that I would always say was that for me was the guy that was my first kind of pastor, who was a former Marine infantry officer and then became an Army chaplain. Anyway, but same thing. I tell people, I'm like, what made him so special to me was he cared about people when he didn't have to, and he didn't stand to gain anything. He just genuinely cared about people, and it came out whatever role it was, and it made you really want to be a part of whatever he was doing and follow him and be like him and everything else. But well, let me ask you, I got 2 more questions. If we only have time for one, let me ask you this one. Was because the focus of the podcast is on leadership and communication. So it's a communication specific question, but I have a theory, sir, that everybody can identify more with people's failures than they can with their successes, because everybody knows what failure feels like. And sometimes it's hard to identify with certain successes because you're like, well, that'll never be me. So I like to ask people about their failures. So this one is, can you tell me about a time when you failed at communicating, specifically communicating, and what you learned from it? And was it something in that failure? Was there something that changed how you approach communication after that?
I don't, I don't know. That's a really tough question. And even when I read it before, I was like, that's going to be I still communicating. Um, I would say if I took my approach to this question would be failure in communicating, like hearing, like active listening. Like we have a tendency a lot of times to hear what people are saying, but not listen to what they're
Mm-hmm.
saying. And so, we a lot of times when people are talking, we're formulating our response before they finish their argument. So you didn't really hear their whole argument in order to have a good response. And so, but a time in my life where I didn't communicate, I'll tell you, it happens so often. That now we just recognize when we say, well, I just failed to communicate that effectively, or I failed to listen to what you were saying. That was on me. I should have listened a little closer, but um, actively communicate is a tough one because I mean, I don't think I've had anything in the communication line that was so detrimental that it affected me so much going forward. Now I could say in my failures in my marriages, those were some very distinguished communication issues. My first marriage failed. The chaplain was trying like heck to work with me, asked me to come to marriage counseling. You need to come talk. He could see it. I could not.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't communicating. I had no idea it was coming. And for some reason, I guess I just thought I was that good that there was no reason she'd ever leave me, but that was not the case. So, um, I'd say second marriage, actively communicating up front what our goals, our ideals, beliefs, values were going forward, because that one failed because we just weren't the same people. We had different thoughts on life. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize we were in the marriage, and you know, a kid later, it's failing because we're not communicating. Um, Same thing with the third marriage. I had no idea that was happening. But this fourth marriage, believe it or not, so I'm gonna take this a different way, I guess. My wife Wendy and she is amazing at communicating, and I'm not. I'm good at it. I'm not great at it, but I'm good at it. But she is really good about self-reflecting, coming back around and saying, I said this yesterday. I want to make sure that you're clear that this is what I meant. And most of the time, like 95% of the time, I'm like, I know exactly what you're saying, and I know exactly what you meant. But I just want to make sure that you know that I know that when I'm reading your responses, that I didn't know that you were really picking up the way I was saying it. I just want to make sure that we're clear. And so I'm like, either yes or no. Yes, I was very clear on what you were saying, or no, I didn't. I'm glad we had this conversation because now I am clear. But I would actually say, so I'm gonna flip the script on you a little bit and say that would be the thing I'd rather talk about is the things that my wife Wendy has taught me about communicating now. And
Okay.
that is, it's okay to come back around and say, was I clear in what I said? This is what I said, this is what I meant. Did you get what I meant when I said? And sometimes I'll say, we banter or whatever. Yeah, but you didn't say that. You said this. Yeah, but I said that. But what I was trying to communicate was this. That is super helpful. And I would tell you that has probably helped me grow a lot in the last, you know, 10 years, 8 years. We've been married 5 years this in August, and we've been together for 8 years. Is the way she communicates, and is very open and very straightforward and honest, in that she's very clear to make sure that she's not misunderstood. And that has really helped a lot of our arguments or disagreements or whatever, because now I'm like, well, I didn't get it that
Yeah.
way. Well, that's not what I was trying to say, babe. This is what I was trying to say. And so that would be a way. The other thing in communicating, The biggest issues I've ever had with communicating is whenever I'm an officer and I feel like when I give an order, it should be followed and it's not.
Right.
And you've seen me do this. You've seen me
Yeah.
and say, maybe I misunderstood what I said, but I said it very clearly. I'm speaking English and stuff like that, and so I don't understand whether issue, but that's me being sarcastic. But at the end of the day, why didn't you understand this is what I meant? But I don't think I've ever had a communication that was so detrimental that it like
catastrophic or something.
catastrophic. I mean, I wish I would have. I've said a lot of things I wish I hadn't said.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we all have, but I've said a lot of things I wish I wouldn't have said because at the time they're funny, but they're not really funny after.
Right.
But yeah, that's how I'm going to answer that one. I'd rather talk about it's good to make sure that people did understand what you said. And so you'll see me do this, or you would see me do this. I would say, this is my intent.
Right.
I understand what that slide says, and it says, but this is what I want you to achieve. And so I don't really necessarily care how you achieve it. I just want, this is my end state. This is what I want to achieve. This is my intent. And when you talk in words like intent and end state, then people are very clear on what it is that you want.
Yeah.
And so that's a good question, and I'm sure I'm missing something really big.
No, that was good. That was a good answer. I tell people there's like I heard it from a cop, but a shooting philosophy of slow. What is it? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So it's like, you practice it slowly until it becomes second nature to how you draw and all that. And anyway, I think you're saying the same thing with communication. It's like, hey, just slow down. Don't, maybe sometimes you don't always say what you mean or didn't hear what they mean, but just slow it down and go, okay, let's try this again. And
I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up in this thing. So let's talk about communication, and let's talk about how the Father communicates with us. And so this will probably, I think this is what I want to ask, what I want to talk about. I'm growing up. I'm an adult. I'm in my first marriage. We're in a custody fight. I'm like at odds with the Lord. And because my marriage is failing, and I'm like, that's all I've ever wanted to be. It was a good husband and a good dad, and everything else will be okay. And I'm questioning the Father on free will. And I'm like, so there's certain things you don't ask the Father for unless you're prepared to have some tribulations.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Never ask for patience, because he's gonna teach you patience. He's not gonna give you patience. He's gonna teach you patience. Free will. Father, I don't understand why you can't make her love me. Why can't you just make her do it? And then everything would be okay. And so, Justin, it hit me. I'm sitting in a courtroom. I'm sitting on the bench outside the courtroom. I'm sitting beside my mom, who's a very religious woman and was with me throughout this whole process. Like, the hardest tribulation I've ever been in my life was custody of my kids. And I made the statement, we just want the judge to give me custody of the kids. Right? I just want him to give me custody. This guy has the power. I feel like I'm the better parent. I just want him to give me custody of the kids. And I'm sitting there talking to my mom, and we're just talking. And I'm sure she's praying. I'm probably both praying back and forth, because we're like getting close to, is this going to happen or not? And it hit me like a ton of bricks of, I don't want them to be told to come to me and be made to come to me. I want them to come because they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned to my mom, and I'm just like bawling, like no real reason. It's like, oh, it's stressful. And I told her, I said, I get it. And she goes, you get what? I said, I finally understand free will. And she's like, that's great. So I explained it to her, and so it took me a while to get through it, because I was real emotional at the time, but I get emotional thinking about it now, because I'm like, that's what the Father means whenever He wants us to want to be there. He could very easily make us all do it.
Yeah, sure.
But that's not the relationship you want. And I do tell my son now, and he hasn't had his kid yet. I said, your world is going to change.
Yeah. And you're going to change.
And yeah, and you're gonna change. I said, and I'm not saying I can't talk about other people's walk or how they feel about their relationship with Yah or any of those things, but I can tell you this. I think as a parent, you relate to Yah much better because Yah's relationship with us is truly that of a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Punishes us when we need to be punished. He lifts us up when we need to be lifted up, supports us when we need to be supported. And that's what you do as a parent. And I said, so you're really, a lot of the things that you read and try to get in the Bible as a kid, you don't really get till you become a parent.
Right.
And then, I'm not saying you can't. I'm not trying to say people that aren't parents don't understand, but I really think that there's a relationship that you can really, empathize with, because now empathy, is trying to understand someone else's position. But as a parent, I'm not sure what the right word is, but I can really relate now better. But that was like, and when we talk about communication, let's talk about communication. That was one of those times where y'all truly communicated with me.
Yeah.
And this is what I want you to learn. This is why you're going through what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Because I needed to teach you free will.
Yeah.
And what sucked, it was like one of the most liberating things ever. I'm not sure I've learned yet.
Well, at least you've learned maybe not to ask for it or something. But
I have learned not to ask for it. I have learned.
Well, I appreciate your time, sir. And for what it's worth, if I was on your end of the podcast of best leader you ever served with, that answer is morphing for me. But you have become a part of that answer for me because I really enjoyed serving with you. I enjoyed your humility. Still appreciate your just transparency. And I don't know if you remember, but there was a specific instance when it was actually the chaplain corps that was going to try to make me do something, and you had to get involved, and it was really stupid. But anyway, you ended up kind of coming to my defense in a goofy battle that you didn't have to. So that has become one of my stories about what does a good leader do for their folks. Well, sometimes they stick their nose out or stick their neck out and put it on the line for them. So anyway, I appreciate you.
Head up. I'm going to tell you this real quick. The same battery commander that did that to me, when I was lieutenant, and still to this day, I fight them all. He said, you got to pick your battles. And I said, but they're all worth fighting. He goes, yeah, but if you fight every battle, then none of them are important.
Yeah.
And I took that and I'm like, well, I get it, but it doesn't mean that you don't fight them all. Maybe you don't fight them all as rigorously, but you can't just not fight, right?
Right.
Now one of my things is I wake up every day, especially as a group commander, I woke up every day feeling like I was fighting in every direction.
Yeah.
But my philosophy really going up is, yeah, you can pick your battles, but you still fight them all, right? And they're all my soldiers. I don't give a crap what unit you're in or where you belong or whatever. If you're in the Department of Defense, you're one of mine. So yeah, I have at the time 7th Group or 14th Battalion or 13th Battalion or Air Defense Battery or whatever, where you're the commander and you're in charge of them. But at the end of the day, you look out for all of them.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many of them come back around and say, hey, thanks for them. Because I'm going to be honest with you, Chaplain, I don't know what I did that day for you.
Yeah.
I don't remember it. And I don't think it's not that I don't care about you. It's just one of those things. Hey, sir, I need some help. I can help. I do it. Target up, target down, next target.
Yeah, yeah. It was one of many that you fought, I'm sure.
But it had an impact on your life, and I'm glad it happened. I wish I remembered it, but at the end of the day, if that would have been one of those battles I chose not to fight, you probably wouldn't like me so much right now.
No, and you're right. You do. I'm sure the higher up you go, the more battles you fight, and you got to pick and choose. But anyway, well, thanks for the time. Sorry about the phone troubles, and glad we got another hour, and I don't even know what it's been, an hour and a half or something in together for this interview.
I told you I'm a talker.
I know, man. I didn't know that.
We're gonna be
You and I
on
need to
here.
do some more chicken and waffles or something if you're such a talker.
You should stop by.
Yeah, I will. I will.
All right, brother.
All right. Appreciate it, sir. Safe travels to you.